innovation and opportunities that allows us to make different solutions and to make a difference, I hope. But let's start by laying the groundwork. First, semantics. Energy and electricity are not the same thing. Electricity at the moment in the UK accounts for a quarter, so 25% of our primary energy use. But the headline, the one that makes all my investors very happy, is the first one, which is that this electricity market in the UK is worth £20 billion every year. It's a big business. And it shouldn't be a surprise, energy as a whole is the single largest industry on our planet. If you look at electricity use in the UK, it's split pretty much evenly between industry, domestic, and services. But this being modern Britain, services and even a portion of industry takes place in city centres. So energy use in the UK, electricity use, is concentrated in urban centres. And this ties in nicely with my final point, which is one of these shiny statistics that sounds great, that London as a city uses as much energy each year as Portugal and Greece combined. And all that's a great headline. What lies underneath it is what's really important. And it's something, my top tip for the day, it's something that we really believe in, is that moving forward, it's going to be the cities and the municipalities that are leading our low-carbon, sustainable energy solutions. There's some very good reasons for this, and we're already starting to see the evidence of this. For example, in my business, some of the most useful policy comes from municipalities and cities and not from the national government. In the US, where the federal government is not willing to engage on climate change issues, cities have stepped up to the plate, and now they're leading the change. So, risk of being a little bit melodramatic, if the 20th century was all about geopolitics and nations at war and development and industrialization, maybe 21st century will be about cities, city centers around the world combating climate change together. And if we look back on it, maybe that's the way we'll look here. So, electricity market, I talk about urban energy, urban wind energy, decentralized energy, microgeneration, similar terms. What are some of the drivers? Well, I already alluded to the first one, policy. So, for example, the Merton Rule, named after the borough in London, but adopted by many other cities throughout the UK, requires that as part of planning permission, they show 10% of their local energy, building energy use, being generated renewably on site. That effectively puts wind and PV and a few other technologies in the same category as fire safety, accessibility requirements, and so forth. It's part of regulation. It's not quite so strict, but it's definitely a huge driver. The next 2 points, Jeremy Nicholson's already addressed. Basically, fossil fuels, a finite resource demand is increasing, therefore the cost is going up, and it will continue to rise. Increased electrification of our energy portfolio. I said 25% today. That's increased dramatically in the last 20 years from what it was, and it's guaranteed to increase even further in the coming 20 years. This is for partially the reasons Jim Wallace mentioned, things like consumer electronics, increasing use of computers, automation, electric motors in industry even. All of this is pushing our electricity use further up, and I've illustrated this with this picture of a train at TGV in France. France has announced that all their trains in 2008 are going to be electric, no more diesel. Of course, in France, that means it's a nuclear-powered train, but that's a different debate. And the last driver is actually a big surprise, a very welcome surprise. I've had lots of hands-on, first-person experience with this. I said a greater corporate valuation of non-financial factors. So companies have always been great at optimizing things in the balance sheet and saying what pays and what doesn't. But what we're seeing is a trend where issues like corporate and social responsibility, leading by example, being proactive, being good members of our community, all of these things are starting to matter at the board level in companies. It's being incorporated into the way they act and they think. So we're actually seeing that, and it is a big part of our business at the moment. Those are the positive things. What are some of the challenges? Well, I've subtitled this as competing against the status quo. And I think the message I'm trying to make here is that fossil fuels are built into the fabric of our society. So technology and infrastructure lock-in, you can take that literally. Look at all the pipelines, distribution centers, distribution lorries, petrol stations, all of this built into our society. You can also look at it in a more abstract sense, infrastructure, education. If you do an audit of higher education in Western countries, you'll be amazed by the number of schools of petroleum engineering. It's an interesting point. How many schools of wind energy engineering are there? Not many yet. So social inertia, a good way of putting this is saying if you've been doing things a certain way for 100 years, you're going to get very good at it. we're not going to be able to change this and turn it around overnight, and we have to accept that and deal with it. On the other hand, if we can keep producing great propaganda images like this one, we've got a chance. I love that image. Okay, so that's sort of the energy side of things, and now let's look at the wind side. If I say wind energy, this is what most people think of: large-scale, geographically remote wind farms. These are massive machines, 40, 50, 80 meters tall, producing many megawatts of power. Fundamentally, it's a different business, so this segment is driven obsessively by maximum efficiency. But the only thing that matters here is pence per kilowatt hour of energy delivered. The non-fiscal drivers, things like the clients that buy wind turbines, they're in the energy generation business. That's what they do for a living every day. In other words, installation, maintenance is part of their regular activities. That differs, it's almost, not quite, completely opposite of our clients. So what are our clients? Urban wind turbines. I've illustrated this using our own QR5 turbine, which I'll show in more detail in the next slide. But let's just talk about the generic concept of urban wind energy. So this is the idea of successfully integrating wind turbines into the urban environment. We acknowledge it's a complementary strategy, so it's not going to provide 100% of our energy needs all the time, but if engineered correctly, it can make a meaningful and significant contribution. Co-locating energy generation at the point of demand has many benefits. Some are obvious, such as logistics and efficiency. Some are less obvious, such as social factors. If you live and work amongst your big wind turbines in your cities, you'll be much more conscious of where your electricity is coming from. This segment is driven by cost to some extent, but that's by no means the only factor. We're also concerned with our clients, are very concerned with minimum hassle. They are not in the wind energy business, and they don't want to have a dedicated person on staff whose job it is to keep them maintained. And that last part on that point, the desire to address sustainability concerns, I was referring to my previous slide about non-financial factors at large companies. And the final bullet point is one that's, I think, our ace on the whole, important aesthetic considerations, both acoustic and visual. And we've got a product, I think, that is very visually appealing, resonates with architects and clients. It's very resonates, I shouldn't use that word, because that implies noise. No, it appeals to architects, clients, and just the common man. The number of times I've been at jobs, I've come to the site, and there'll be people just literally standing there, looking at the wind turbine saying, I don't know what it is, but I really want one. I think that's fantastic. A few months ago, we commissioned a turbine at a school, and when we finished through the commissioning process, and when I turned it on, it started spinning. There's this little roar of children's voices in the schoolyard cheering and applauding as it started spinning. And this might sound corny, but I mean, there is an element in there of people buying into the idea, and that's very important. So in more detail, our design, as you might have noticed, it doesn't look like a conventional propeller type. We call this a vertical axis wind turbine. It spins around this vertical axis. And we came up with design, or we chose this design because we wanted to produce the best product for the urban wind environment. So this is it. Key stats, around 10,000 kilowatt hours per annum. Design life of 25 years. And I'll mention low noise and vibration, which is very important for our choices. Here's another image. This is from one of our wind tunnel tests. Time-lapse photography, so I'm not at risk of being chopped up there. Gives an idea of the size of the turbine, 5 meters high and 3 meters at its maximum diameter, human scale. And also, when it's spinning, you see its distinctive tulip glass shape. Just a non-technical slide to give you an intuitive feeling of what the vertical axis design gives us over a horizontal one. Effectively, the urban wind environment is one characterized by gustiness and shifting wind directions. And a conventional horizontal type propeller has difficulties operating in this regime. Vertical design is actually advantageous, and we actually do something called gust tracking. So we chase the energy in the gusts. Okay, without talking too much more about the points, let's actually go with some case studies. I think this is actually the school I was referring to. I say school, it's King's College School in Wimbledon. It felt more like a luxury country club. Really nice school, and that's their brand new science. And they put the turbine on the roof of that science lab, and that's a typical type of installation, roof mounted. Here it's right above the classroom, so noise and vibration is extremely important, and we're not transmitting noise into the room. Different flavor. This is a ground-mounted turbine. It's in a 50-meter mast next to a light industrial unit in East London. In this case, the developer was building these on reclaimed land or brownfield industrial units, as part of their planning process, putting in these turbines really facilitated the process. In fact, they spec in these turbines, and the planners just said, okay, go ahead. And they loved it, and they're very happy with the product, and so they've actually bought more turbines by this motivation. It helps the planning process. In the background, you see the large wind turbines at the Ford plant in Dagenham, who did the same thing for the same reason. I like this picture because it makes ours look bigger. It's not. This one's coming up. We're installing the first turbine in around 2 weeks' time, a bit less than 2 weeks' time, and the array will be completed in January. Liverpool is the European City of Culture in 2008, and the centerpiece of the redevelopment is the King's Dock Arena project. And there you see an array. So this is another type of installation. We have a whole bunch of turbines en masse, an array. So I think this will be a big one. You should see this in a lot of press and publicity. Just to give you another idea, this is also a computer-generated image. It's going to come in April and May of next year. Residential buildings in South London, 7 turbines on top of a very windy site, using the building to locate the turbines in the advantageous area. Something different, I can't tell you who the client is because they're having their first release today. They wouldn't let me tell you who they are. But this is in Milton Keynes. It's a commercial site, but the turbine is not there to power the building, but rather, in this very poor photograph, there's an electric car charging point. Obviously, the electricity produced by the turbine doesn't go straight into the cars, but the concept is something that's sympathetic to consumers. And if that gets the message across, then I think we're doing something right. So on the commercial side, to date we sold 46 turbines, but that's not the story. The story is we just sold a lot more if we could produce them. Production at the moment is sold out to the middle of summer next year. We have 104 in planning, which means they're pretty much committed to using them. But the basic story is if our production team could catch up with the commercial team, we'd have a lot more business. Those were small turbines. Just quickly, 2 slides showing the other side of our business. We're doing large-scale integrated projects. So these are no longer 5-meter mass-produced turbines. These are custom-built for a specific job. This is a massive building, twin towers, and 20-meter turbines in between. And the idea of the building actually accelerates the flow through the turbines in this case. This is another one that's been getting a lot of press recently. It's the Pearl River project in China. Unfortunately, despite getting lots of press, you can't see the turbines because they're inside of ducts. But believe me, they're in there. So this is another side of our business. So, to summarize then, I would like to say that, yes, new concept of putting wind energy and energy generation together has resulted in new drivers and new challenges met by innovation in technology and in business. That's my key point. In terms of challenges, well, I've taken the liberty of vandalizing my own slide and taking it plural because as far as I'm concerned, there's one challenge for us, and that is growth, scalability, coming out ahead. So we have a plan and we have an ambition. We just need to achieve it. At the moment, we're looking to install 150 turbines or so in 2008, which is great. But if that's all we do, it's not going to make that much of a difference. But our dream is that, let's say in 4 years' time, we have a refined product that's even more cost-effective, even more reliable, even less expensive, and if we install something like 10,000 turbines, well, at that point we start making a considerable difference, and that's what we're aiming for. Thank you.